obviously some people, if you're buying your PPOR, you're a bit restricted on area.
Yep. At different points in time, the answer to where to invest and where should I place my money.
You've got your, say budget at, what number would you like to pick? $1 million?
$1 million bucks. Let's call it that.
$1 million purchase price.
How to become a property investor, part 2. Where should I place my money? I've gone and spoken to a mortgage broker and worked out, hey, I can borrow $1 million to go buy an investment property. Yeehaw. But what do I do with that information and where should I actually start looking? Curtis, how are you?
Yeah, going well. I think you're Jacob Wright, our test case from from the previous
Yes.
episode.
Yeah.
You've got $1 million in bank lending now, which is a great outcome.
Well,
Congratulations.
Thank you for the pre-approval. I really appreciate it, Curtis. Nice speed as well. I like that touch. Okay, so this is a podcast about broadening your horizons and taking action. These two things can be polar opposites and confusing when you have to do both. But the reality is, when you go become a property investor, you will be a better property investor. You are increasing your chances of success by magnitudes if you open up your mind about where you can buy that goes beyond your little circle of what you know. Try and expand your horizons to a national horizon and look across Australia, not just your backyard. This will open up your options dramatically. It will help support your cash flow, particularly if you live in Sydney, Melbourne as well, Brisbane, and some of the more expensive capitals. It will increase the chance of success in longer term property investing, and it goes away from traditional notions of buying what you know, buying what your parents bought, buying what your uncle bought, and sticking to your own patch. It goes against that, but thinking a little bit bigger really, really helps. Now, why do I say that, Kurt?
Yeah, well, this is a conversation we have a lot. So obviously some people, if you're buying your PPOR, you're a bit restricted on area.
Yep, that's a bit
But if you're purchasing an investment property, all bets are off. Purchasing an investment property,
It's just money.
It's just money, and you're purchasing property, and you should be guided to the best extent possible by the returns.
100%.
You're not living there. You don't need to see it on a day-to-day basis. You don't need to walk past it every day. If a property in Hobart is going to outperform a property down the street for you, then the one in Hobart is the one to buy.
Yep.
And it really is a numbers game. At the end of the day, as a property investor, you're seeking a return, like whether it be a cash flow return, a capital return, or both. And that you need to be open to the possibilities where you can get the best return for the budget that you have. We spoke, last episode about the kind of what's possible and what's not. Now that you know what's possible, like of that list of, hundreds of thousands of properties across the country, like where are the best ones going to be that are going to give you the best return?
Yeah, 100%. So that's nugget 1, chase the best return. Nugget 2 is properties move in cycles. That means that the Sydney property cycle is different to the Perth property cycle and different to the Brisbane property cycle, Adelaide, etc. Now, some of these are correlated with each other, but that doesn't mean that Sydney properties and Perth properties rise at the same rate at the same time. So that differentiation in growth cycles and market cycles means that at different points in time, the answer to where to invest and where should I place my money leads to a different result. So those two factors about chasing the return and understanding that returns differ between locations and time cycles is really, really important, because it helps you work out that, hey, if that's true and the data says that's true, then maybe I should look beyond my backyard because my backyard isn't showing me the best returns. And the goal of this is to go and deliver better returns.
Yeah. And can I add maybe a third one to that? The returns can differ between types of property as well.
Yes.
And not all budgets are equal. An $800,000 apartment in Sydney, if you take that budget to Adelaide, you might be getting a house on a very decent plot of land in a premium suburb, potentially. So by taking that same budget around the country, not only are you looking at different property cycles, but you're looking at potentially different within property, different asset classes as well. And they can have different returns. So if you for example, if you get it all right and you time it and you get you find an area that's at the right part of the cycle and you can buy an asset class that's also got a better return profile, like you can end up with a far better result investing outside of your local suburb or maybe buying an apartment down the road.
100%. That is a really, really good point as well. Particularly pertinent for Sydney-siders. It's actually a conversation I had a couple of nights ago with a lovely couple who have a borrowing capacity, 600 to 800,000. They were Sydney-based, always based in Sydney, and they worked out that doesn't actually buy me that much in Sydney, pretty much anywhere now. I'm going to have to go out here. Maybe I will buy that. But it was a conversation about exactly what we talked about. And the education process with them was pretty much the points that we talked about. That different markets have different cycles. Australia is a beautiful country, not just Sydney. And there's people all across Australia and housing supply issues all across Australia in different areas. And the fundamentals of why you want to invest in property exist elsewhere too. So bear that in mind, and would you consider an open mind? And through the conversation, they're like, that actually makes a lot of sense. Plus, I really like the idea of not owning a strata apartment. They didn't want to buy an apartment in Sydney, and they wanted to own land. So that education piece is really, really useful. And I hope listeners here can take that message on, because ultimately it should lead to better decisions if you broaden your horizons there and think wider. But in saying that, the point of this little series is to provide people clarity. Feels like for many who would be listening to this, they would respond to this, be like, wow, you just made it really hard for me. Like, what? I was going to go buy my next door neighbor's house that I just walked past. Like, that's easy. That's how I go shopping. Like, that's generally what I do. I go to the fish market, buy the fish I can see. Makes me feel good that I can see it. I know what I'm going to be putting in my stomach. That is the general process that people have. Buying something on a computer so large, like a house in an area I've never walked past or seen, is confusing. Like, it can make me feel really, really uncomfortable, which is completely understandable. But through this, I want to try and help you go through the decision frameworks and help narrow the path more and more for you, so you get to a clearer outcome of where to buy and what to buy and how you go and do that. So let's run through some of the detail here.
Yeah. So you're Jacob in this circumstance. Yes. So let's step through how you would approach this. You've got your, say, budget at, what number would you like to pick? $1 million?
$1 million bucks. Let's call it that.
$1 million purchase price is what you can work with. So let's assume, you're based in Sydney and you're thinking, all right, an owner occupier for that doesn't work for me for my circumstances. So I'm in the investment mindset. Once you've hit that kind of decision and you're like, all right, I'm in the investment mindset, where do you go from there? What's your starting point?
Yeah, great question. I'm going to need to work out where to buy. And, my starting point is not real estate and domain. It's crystallizing the areas that I should be looking at. Now, I want to do well in the short run. I want to front load my capital growth returns as much as possible, because it will accelerate my portfolio. If I can turn my $1 million property investment to $1.5 million quicker, then sooner rather than later, the more options I'm going to have in terms of exiting that investment, purchasing my owner occupier down the line, the general comfort of investing in property. It sounds great if I'm going to deliver that return quickly. So what I'm going to be doing is narrowing my research on areas that will have the long-term fundamentals that are there, but will accelerate growth in the short run. That's the framework I'm looking for. Now, how do I achieve that framework? I've got $1 million budget. I may be open-minded to splitting that into 2 investments or 1. But the first point is, where am I looking? So this is the thing that I'm looking for. I'm looking for an area that has more demand than supply. That is a broad metric to look at. If there's a strong economy there, it means people are moving in. It means that people are in jobs. Could mean incomes are rising, and it means that the demand for housing is really high while the supply isn't keeping up. When you are in that scenario, price pressure usually begins in the rental market and then starts feeding through into the price market. Now, we have seen growth cycles across the country in different pockets, from Bendigo and Geelong in, 2016, 17 from memory, Logan in those time areas, then to Hobart, now to Perth. We've seen all of these things, and it always follows the same patterns of the economy is strengthening, the employment markets are strengthening, people are moving in, and the demand for housing is higher than the supply of housing. So that's the fundamentals of what I am looking for. Now, how do I find that?
That's what I was going to say, because that's other than just Googling, does Perth have a strong economy? Like, how do people get some of the data to actually work through that?
Yeah, I want raw data. I don't want news. I don't want secondary data. I want to look at actual things that are happening. The market is vested. There's so many opinions and views out there. If I start looking at news articles, I'm just going to be
go down a rabbit hole.
I'm going to be fed what someone's telling me. So I want raw data. The raw data that I want to look for is momentum in that market. So this is a golden nugget. People pay $6,000, $10,000, $15,000 in courses, fees, buyer's agent costs. This is what they use. They use DSR data. Now, what does that actually mean? This is demand and supply ratio. So the great people at this organization, at this data organization, have used history over time, have correlated property markets, and looked at a range of demand factors. Things like days on market. If the number of days, when someone sells a home, that home gets listed, and if it's on the market for longer, that signals a weak market. If it gets snapped up really, really quickly, that's a days on market indicator. If that's falling and going down, it's an indicator that, hey, people are trying to buy in here, demand levels are rising. I want to look at vacancy rates. I want to see that vacancy rates are coming down in that area, because that shows rental pressure building. I want to look at supply factors in that area as well. I want to look at, is there a lot of new supply coming there? You can measure that. That's easily measured because it takes a lot of time for building approvals to kick in. You can get building approvals by location, by states, and by tracking whether that area is in a housing shortage. So breaking it down a little bit, I'm probably trying to work out a big area first, like a city. That's kind of what I'm looking for to begin with. Which city should I be looking at? And these are the broad metrics that I'm going to look at. Demand and supply ratios in that area. I'm going to be looking at days on market, vacancy rates. I'm going to be looking at ABS employment data and tracking how that state is performing relative to itself over time in its employment market. I'm also going to be looking at how it's performing in terms of economic activity relative to itself. So is Perth, for example, delivering more output than it usually does versus its average? Is it in a stronger employment market than it usually has? Is it producing enough housing approvals relative to the population
growth
kicking in? These are pretty basic concepts, but that's what I'm looking for first, to come up with a picture of where to look for. And then I'm going to use specific DSR data. I'm going to buy myself a subscription to this service. I don't even know what it is, but it's what everyone does. I know that. These are our clients doing really, really well in property investing. They all have DSR data subscriptions. Now, I'm going to buy myself a subscription and go through the process of learning about this tool, because it's a nice, neat tool that measures locations and how it's performing relative with demand supply ratios compared over periods of time. That is my starting point. So I'm going to do high level research on those things. I could probably do this in an hour or two. Be like, cool, it's identified these kind of locations there. And now I'm going to go into the DSR tool data and pick out locations from here, put in my inputs, being like, what areas are doing really well, and then track the key data metrics. It'll spit out 30, 40 data metrics there, and then compare them. The things that I want to look for is an area with all those strong fundamentals that I talked about. And that gives me a pretty good starting point. Now, because I'm Jacob and I feel a little bit uncomfortable with my first property investment, I'm going to add some handcuffs to myself a little bit. Australia's a huge place. There's so many suburbs, so many states. I'm going to add some handcuffs. I'm going to add, it must be big city. I'm going to take away volatility. I don't want volatility. It's scary. So I'm going to take away all mining regions. I'm going to take away many locations that have spitting out great data sets. I'm going to be like, nah, it's too small. So I'm probably going to pick a capital more than 1 million people. Probably leaves 6 cities that I can possibly invest in. I don't need perfection. I want to take action, and I'm balancing some levels of uncomfortableness that I have, and I'm trading that security off for certainty. So with those handcuffs put in place, I now have a broad framework of where I should buy. Go on the DSR data. It's probably spitting out like I know what it's spitting out now because we see all these property investors buying it. When our inboxes are full of people showing me Townsville, how many emails do we get about that? And Perth and locations in Perth.
Yeah.
The reasons why people are looking at here and all the buyers agents are looking at here is because they're going through this process. They're not like gurus. These people aren't like economic masterminds and property masterminds. They're just going through a very simple process that I've just talked about and charging people thousands of dollars to help them go through that process with the confusion that they have rather than the clarity. This hopefully arms you with some clarity to be like, use the DSR data to go and help you make those choices.
And this can take a little bit of time. I know you mentioned, you could probably knock it out in a couple of hours, which you've got a bit of experience. For some people, this is going to be a little bit of a learning curve to find this data, understand it, and just get used to dealing with this data environment, basically, as a decision-making framework. So it can be a little bit overwhelming for some people, but it is kind of like a necessary step. So if it takes a little bit of time or a weekend that you have to invest in getting your head around this stuff, where the data sources are, getting them, downloading them, getting them in a format you can use them.
Yep.
If it takes a couple of weekends, that's the investment that will help you make the rest of your journey easier. So if you haven't got it in an hour and you're like, I've been sitting at this computer for an hour and I don't feel like I'm any further in front than I was an hour ago, that's cool. Like it can take a little bit of time, but that's the process to go through.
Yes. It's what other people are doing. It's what the experts are doing. They're using DSR data to work out locations. Providing a 5-point metric for you. So use the DSR data. That'll spit out specific locations for you. It'll show you areas with strong demand and supply imbalances. That will give you a microscope of where to look. Go pick 10 suburbs from there to begin with. Be like, here's 10 suburbs in my set location that fit this criteria. So it gets you suburb level analysis that you're looking for. That's where it's really useful. Now, before you get to that DSR data point, maybe you can do it concurrently, is start doing a little bit of research into the where to look as well. So you do the DSR data, you have that running for you, pick out 10 suburbs. It might show you areas across the country a little bit. Now, verify that a little bit. You might pick out Townsville, it might pick out Perth, it might pick out somewhere in South Australia. Be like, okay, that's a starting point, but now I'm looking at three different areas. What's happening there? So then I'm going to look at things like population growth and housing supply relative to the demand there. So I'm going to look for housing supply indicators. Housing supply indicators are going to be about housing starts, housing constructions, dwelling approvals. I want to see that trending down. I want to see a housing supply crisis building. I want to see people not building homes. That is something.
And ideally,
property
population going up. Yeah,
that combination. I want to track both of those things. That's Perth at the moment. It's why everyone wants to go buy in Perth. People are building well below average and population growth are well above average. That combination is, wow, that sounds good. More and more people coming in and less homes being built. Property investor, hurrah.
Which is kind of the scenario we have now, like those macro factors of Perth, plus you have a DSR tool that spits out a bunch of Perth postcodes. Like, there you go. Yes. You're off on your property hunt.
Cool. So now I've got two things. I've got the DSR data, and now I've got like a supply type analysis. You can find that data pretty quickly on the ABS. Look at housing starts.
I think what you said about that being a verification is a good way to think about it. It's like you're just verifying, like, all right, I'm getting this tool is providing me with some postcodes. Like, what is going on here? Is this just some random like data fluctuation fluke that doesn't appear to be backed by anything? Or am I talking about Perth that's got strong population growth and low building approval?
It's
a verification tool.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you can start off with the micro. The DSR data gives you the micro, which is great, but now you want to verify the macro and be like, hey, look, is the broader frameworks okay in this area? So then you start digging into that area a little bit more because now you've got a spotlight. You've got a spotlight on something. Now you know what to look for. It's much, much easier than looking really, really broad about looking everywhere. Now you've got a bit of a spotlight. This is what I'm looking for. Get into the housing supply side of the equation there and population growth. You want to be ensuring that it's not next to an area where they just released tons of land and there's going to be a huge influx of people going in there and supply going in. Those areas probably want to rule out. You want to put some handcuffs in. So when you are looking at that DSR data and you're picking in suburbs, as Jacob, I'm a new investor, so I'm going to put capitals and certain locations. I'm going to just rule out, not going to pick them. So I picked out a few locations, looked at the housing supply data there. that is a lot of it there. I also want to track incomes. You can get income level data. I want to see that income levels in and around the area that I'm looking at are pretty good relative to price. This is where Sydney is tricky. Incomes are pretty low relative to the high values here. So you want to check out broader affordability. That affordability means that there's capacity for price rises to occur. So there's pressure happening. You want to see the pressure, the demand pressure coming in. You want to see the supply pressure, the housing supply pressure being built up in the years ahead. And you want to see that it's an area where there's capacity for price growth. That's where you're doing an affordability check. Is this an area where people live and they've got high enough incomes, or it's rising incomes, or the surrounding suburbs around it, those incomes are higher, because then there might be people moving in from those suburbs into this area. You want to track all of that. It's that is what creates like spillover momentum, where owner occupiers are being shifted off into this suburb because it's the closest suburb that you have. So you want to track an affordability spillover a little bit. CoreLogic gives you some mapping about this, as well as
But I think what I would say here is that, because this is all a lot of data that a lot of people get stuck trying to wade through, I think a good way to contextualize it is you're looking for red flags a little bit here. Yes. So you've got some like suburbs that have spat out as the ones that are to look at. You're basically doing some data research on all these different metrics that like Jacob/Redem has mentioned. And you're really just looking for red flags. Like, are there some things here that would give me pause? For example, like, are there a bunch of new housing estates that have just been announced or something? Are there, is population moving backwards? Like, are there any red flags here that would make me think, hey, maybe I don't want to choose this area, I want to look somewhere else? So it's not like we mentioned in episode 1, you're not necessarily looking for perfection in this data set, being like, I found the most perfect, beautiful combination of data metrics I've ever seen in my life. You're more looking for red flags to be like, okay, do all these other metrics broadly support the proposition that this has capacity to grow? You don't need it to be perfect. You're more looking for anything that, like I say, would be concerning, as opposed to something that shoots the lights out.
Yeah, exactly. And it spills back down to action is the most important step. So there's a starting point. Get on DSR data. That is literally what a lot of people do, and frame it up as like a lot of noise, but really it's a subscription to a service that can do a lot of the work, the legwork for you, and does pretty much a lot of the data heavy lifting for you, and then verify that data a little bit with a little bit more road testing, look at supply more specifically and affordability as two sort of key benchmarks there to look at. And now you have the broad frameworks of, hey, this is the area to look at. This then goes into the next question. I'm just going to give you this insight as to what does an ideal property investment look like. If you want to keep it basic and you want to be a buy and hold investor, if I'm Jacob, I just want to put some money down that has that broad buy and hold framework. It's going to do well over the short run and it's going to rise over time. That's what I'm looking for through this property investment. Now, what sort of product am I looking for? I'm going to rule out all apartments. I'm keeping it simple. The idea is clarity. So how do I keep clarity? Take off apartments from the filter that you look at. Now you can probably go into real estate and look at filters. Make the land size above 500 square meters. That's there. Ideally, if you can, make the frontage above 15, if you can. The home is probably going to be something that is in good enough condition. You're buying a house and a house has problems. Problems arise over time. You want to buy something in good enough condition, but you don't want to buy anything new. So you're probably looking for a brick home built in between 1980 to 2010. That's now getting 500 square meters, 15 meter frontage, and you got a location set. Now when you go and do this, when you go through the real estate domain,
should have a short list.
You should have a short list. You get pretty close. Be like, wow, now I've got 10 properties to look at to drop my $1 million in. And these properties have data backing them, have enough level of research there, and tick the boxes. This is the thing. This is the message that I want to give to listeners and anyone watching this is the properties that pop up on this search metric, by and large, are incredibly correlated with each other. You want to ensure you are getting value, and we'll talk more about that in another episode about the meta level detail as to the next steps you take after you've done this and you've come up with a list of properties that you actually want to buy. We'll talk about that more specifically in another episode. But here's the thing. you want to then be buying at close enough to market value, a little bit below if you can, but close enough to market value. Now, the long-term performance of all of these properties on this shortlist, particularly if they're in the same suburb, are directly correlated with one another. One of them, if you buy them, if I'm dropping $1 million here, now in 10 years' time, whatever property I've bought here will be worth within a 10% range of each other. One of them is not going to grow at massively more than the other one in the majority of cases. When you rule out all the red flags, like, it's not on an unmade road, we'll talk about that more specifically, they are correlated with each other. Now, when you understand this, it becomes much more simple because now it makes perfection, something you're not looking for, action easier to take, because even if you choose number 3 or number 10 on that list, or number 7 or number 10 on that list, the difference in performance and results to me and what I actually care about, returns, is very, very little amongst this on my list.
Yeah. The process you've gone through means the list is only properties that are effectively going to be successful investments for you in an ideal world.
Yeah.
So now you're just choosing between which one is ideally going to be the most successful, but the fact that it's a short list for a reason. It's not like 5 of them perform and 5 of them don't. Like, you have a short list of properties that will perform.
100%.
Now,
and they're correlated.
Yeah. Now it just comes down to what are the negotiations like for each one? How can you pick them up? Some of the specifics, like, are they on main roads, things like that. But you're on, if it's on the short list, you're already like 90% of the way there.
Yeah, it's brilliant. You know what? This thought bubble has energized and excited me. So I am going to do a YouTube video or some level of performance. I'll do it over the next month or so, where I do this, where I go through. I'm going to do it in an hour. You tested me. You said that you can't do this quick enough. I am, obviously I've got a lot of experience and I've done this before. I'm going to do it inside an hour. I'm going to show you how to start from nothing. Can I do my own borrowing capacity? And then do step 1, work out exactly what I can afford as a case study. And then I'm going to show you exactly what to buy. If I can, I'm going to pick up the phone, speak to the real estate at the time. Probably won't make an offer because I don't actually want to buy the thing, but I'm going to go through the process and show you exactly why I've picked an area. I'm going to buy the subscription. I'm going to show you exactly what it does. And this is the thing I want to give everyone. I want to give everyone a checklist. This is the next step, a due diligence checklist of this is all the stuff that you need to do, all the red flags, main roads, blah, blah, blah. Just keep it simple, rule it all out. Be like, if it doesn't tick the checklist items, I'm not buying it. Like, there's hundreds, there's thousands of properties that must tick this checklist. Tick boxes. There's going to be a value question in there. Tick, boom, go action. And then the results will flow. I say this working with hundreds of property investors over a long period of time, speaking in a close relationship about their financial performance and having insight to a lot of it. Done lots, or I haven't done actually lots of courses, but spoken to the best buyers agents in the country, have access to them on my phone, get access to so much property investing knowledge and experience. This is what they do. And hopefully something like this can help you go and do it for free without spending thousands of dollars on courses or fees or anything like that, and just get you to take action that benefits you. Curtis, pleasure.
Yeah, as always.